Put your hand flat on the nearest surface, a table, a desk, your own knee, whatever's there. Feel that? The solid, undeniable, slightly cold press of a real object against your skin? Good. Now brace yourself, because that never happened. You did not touch the table. You have, in fact, never touched anything or anyone in your entire life. Not your phone, not your dinner, not the person you married. This isn't a riddle. It isn't wordplay. It is one of the strangest, most rigorously proven facts in all of physics. Two objects made of ordinary matter can get astonishingly close, but they never, ever meet. So today we're asking a question you've never once thought to ask because the answer felt too obvious. Why can't you touch anything? And who exactly has been forging this sensation this whole time?
The look. Every human makes the same face when I tell them this. A sort of insulted confusion. But I can feel it, they whimper. Yes, and therein lies the beautiful, elaborate lie.
Chapter 1. The most obvious thing you believe is wrong. Let's start with what you think is happening. You reach for a cup. Your fingers arrive. They stop. The cup pushes back. You lift it. Job done. Your brain files this under touching a cup, the way it has filed roughly 900,000 such events without complaint. And this feels like the safest belief you own. You'd bet your house on it. You'd bet your hands on it. But touch, in the way you imagine it, two surfaces genuinely making contact, atom pressed against atom, does not occur anywhere in the universe. To understand why, we have to shrink down. Past the skin, past the cells, down to where the real story is hiding. Down to the atom.
You have spent your whole life leaning on chairs, shaking hands and hugging relatives, utterly convinced you were making contact. You were not. You were hovering, elegantly, invisibly, and at all times.
Chapter 2. Everything you own is mostly nothing. Here is the first uncomfortable fact. An atom is almost entirely empty space. In the center sits the nucleus, the dense bit, the protons and neutrons. Around it, a haze of electrons. But the gap between the two is enormous. If you blew an atom up to the size of a football stadium, the nucleus, the part with nearly all the mass, would be a single pea sitting on the center spot. The electrons? A few specks drifting somewhere up in the back row. Everything in between is nothing. No stuff, just distance. You are around 99.9999% empty space. So is the table, so is this planet. If you removed all the empty space from every human on Earth, packed the actual matter together with no gaps, the entire species would fit inside the volume of a sugar cube. A heavy sugar cube, but a sugar cube. So the real question isn't why can't I touch things? It's stranger than that.
This pea is the solid part of the atom. The rest of this enormous stadium, empty. And you, my confident friend, are built entirely out of stadiums.
If you are mostly empty and the chair is mostly empty, why don't you simply fall straight through it like an unfortunate ghost? Why does nothing ever pass through anything? That is the good question. Do try to keep up.
Chapter 3. The invisible force that holds you up. The answer is that you are not held up by solid matter. You are held up by a force. Every atom is wrapped in a cloud of electrons, and electrons all carry a negative electric charge. And there is an iron rule of the universe. Like charges repel. Push two negatives together, and they shove back harder and harder the closer they get. So as your fingertip approaches the table, the electrons in your skin get near the electrons in the wood, and they refuse. They repel each other with a force that at that tiny distance becomes staggeringly strong. Your finger stops. Not because it hit something, because it was pushed back by an invisible electromagnetic force before contact could ever happen. There is always a gap, a tiny one, a fraction of a billionth of a meter, but a real one, a permanent no man's land your atoms are never allowed to cross. When you press harder, you don't close the gap. You just make the force push back harder. That resistance, that firmness, that lovely solid feeling of a table, it's not wood. It's repulsion.
Marvelous, isn't it? You sit on a chair, and at no point do you make contact with it. You float a fraction above it all day, held aloft by a force field, like a very smug hovercraft that pays council tax.
Chapter 4, The Deeper Reason, Pauli's Rule. Now, electric repulsion is the headline, but physicists will tell you there's a second, deeper reason things won't merge, and it's even stranger. It's called the Pauli exclusion principle. In simple terms, electrons are fiercely antisocial. Two of them are not allowed to occupy the same state in the same place at the same time. It is a hard law of quantum mechanics, not a suggestion. So when you try to force two atoms into the same space, it isn't only that their charges repel, it's that their electrons are quantum mechanically forbidden from being crammed together at all. The universe files an objection. That's not an exaggeration, by the way. This same principle, electrons flatly refusing to be squeezed together, is what stops certain collapsed stars from crushing themselves into nothing. The exact rule that keeps your hand from passing through your desk is the rule holding up the corpses of stars across the galaxy, which means your inability to touch a biscuit is powered by the same law as the cosmos. You're welcome.
Picture two electrons forced to share a seat. They would rather generate a resistance so titanic it holds up entire dead stars than sit next to one another. And people say I'm difficult.
Chapter 5. So what is touch, then? So if your atoms never actually meet the table's atoms, what are you feeling? You're feeling the push. When that electromagnetic force resists your finger, it squashes the tissue in your fingertip ever so slightly. Buried in your skin are tiny sensors that detect that deformation. They fire off an electrical signal which sprints up your nerves to your brain. And your brain, working with pure electricity and no actual object, decides, we are touching a table. Smooth, solid, cool to the touch, lovely. You never felt the table. You felt a force converted into electricity, interpreted by a brain sitting in total darkness inside your skull, which has itself never touched anything in its life. So touch is not contact. Touch is your brain's interpretation of a force it can't cross. The warmth of a hand, the softness of a blanket, the reassuring solidity of the floor. All of it is a story your nervous system tells you about a barrier it can never actually breach.
Your brain is a damp organ, locked in a bony box, receiving frantic telegrams from your fingertips, and inventing an entire sensation of touch from the messages. It has never seen a table. It has never held a cup. It simply takes the electrical gossip and produces a convincing show, every single time.
Chapter 6, the part nobody likes to think about. Here's where it gets personal. If you have never touched anything, then you have never touched anyone. Every handshake, every hug, the hand of your child, the face of someone you love. In each case, your atoms came dizzyingly close and then stopped, held apart by that unbreakable microscopic gap. You have spent your whole life a fraction of a hair away from everyone you've ever cared about. Close enough to feel the force, never close enough to make contact. And this is where a curious psychological thing happens. Because you don't feel a gap. You never have. You feel closeness, pressure, warmth, love, total seamless contact. Your brain has quietly erased the gap from your experience entirely. It decided long ago that you didn't need to know. That the truth, a permanent, unbridgeable distance between you and everything else, was simply not useful information for getting through the day. So it hid it flawlessly for your entire life.
A sobering thought, isn't it? Every embrace in human history has been a near miss. Do keep this to yourself at funerals.
Chapter 7, Why Your Brain Lies to You on Purpose. So why the deception? why doesn't your brain just tell you the truth? Because the truth is useless for survival. Imagine your distant ancestor reaching for a spear and their brain helpfully announcing, technically, we are not gripping this spear. We are merely exchanging electromagnetic forces with a region of near total emptiness. That ancestor gets eaten. That ancestor does not become your grandmother. So your brain built a simplified, practical, magnificently convincing version of reality. Solid things are solid. Touch is touch. Don't ask questions. It's the same brain that fills in your blind spot, invents color out of wavelengths, and smooths over the fact that your eyes jump around constantly. Your entire experience of the world is a helpful edit, a user-friendly summary of a reality far too strange to live inside directly. Touch is just the edit you were most certain was real.
Evolution has no interest in whether your worldview is accurate. It cares only whether it keeps you alive long enough to reproduce. And the cup is solid, pick it up, works far better than the truth, which is a physics lecture nobody has time for while being hunted.
Chapter 8. Is touch a lie or the best word we have? Now, before you spiral, let's be fair to touch. Yes, your atoms never meet, but the force between them is absolutely real. The push is real. The information your nerves send is real. The feeling is real. When you hold someone's hand, something genuine passes between you, a real physical interaction of forces, close enough that the two of you affect each other at the atomic level. Maybe touch was never really about atoms clinking together like billiard balls. Maybe it was always this, getting close enough to feel the force of another thing in the world.
So, do not despair. You have not been living a lie so much as living a translation. Touch is simply the word your species agreed upon for close enough that the universe pushes back. Which, when you put it like that, is almost romantic. Almost. I shall now stop before I develop feelings.
Chapter 9. The real point isn't that your whole life is an illusion and nothing is real. The point is that the ordinary world, the boring, solid, obvious one you walk through every day, is hiding something extraordinary in plain sight. The simple act of resting your hand on a table is underneath a silent negotiation between countless force fields governed by laws that also hold up dead stars, mediated by a brain that has never touched a single thing it describes. You didn't need to travel to a black hole to find the strangeness of the universe. It was in your fingertips the entire time. So, why can't you touch anything? Because your atoms are mostly empty space. Because their electrons repel each other before they can ever meet. Because the Pauli exclusion principle forbids them from merging at all. Because a permanent microscopic gap sits between you and everything else in existence. And because your brain, kindly and quietly, has spent your whole life pretending otherwise. So you could get on with the business of living, blissfully unaware that you are floating a hair's breadth above the entire world.
You are not solid. You are a shimmering cloud of mostly nothing, held together and held apart by invisible forces, gliding through a world you have never once physically touched. And you are about to complain that your day was boring.
Conclusion. You'll never actually feel the fur. The dog will never actually feel the pat. And yet, somehow, the love gets through anyway, carried across an impossible gap by forces neither of you will ever see. So go ahead, touch something, touch someone. Just know that technically, you're getting as close as the universe will ever allow. And that turns out to be close enough.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go not touch a cup of tea and pretend, like everyone else, that I never heard any of this.